The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good morning and good afternoon. Welcome to the webinar titled HIPAA Omnibus, How to Do HIPAA Security Risk Analysis. My name is Anupam Sahai, and I am the co-founder and CEO of AGFI Incorporated. The company AGFI provides a comprehensive security risk and compliance management platform for businesses to subscribe to. My background is I have had I have about 25 plus years of experience in the high-tech industry, specifically in healthcare IT, cloud computing, networking, security, and compliance. In terms of the topics that we will cover today, we will focus our discussion today on HIPAA and security risk analysis. But as you will see, some of the discussion around security risk analysis is quite generic and applicable across the board in a vertical agnostic manner. So we can leverage this information across multiple industries. But today we'll focus on healthcare specific, HIPAA specific information. So we will talk about HIPAA Omnibus, the summary of changes that have happened so far, and what does it mean for medical providers, business associates, and subcontractors. Anybody who deals with PHI information will be discussed. Then we'll talk about meaningful use analysis and the grants what the requirements are. And one of the key requirements there is security risk analysis. So we'll talk about major portion of our talk will be around how to do HIPAA security risk analysis, what are the lessons learned, and at the end we'll talk about automated tools for doing security risk analysis. At the end we will have Q&A, so I would encourage you to please type in your questions as you go along in the Q&A section of the GoToWebinar tool that you have on your desktop, and we will take the questions at the end. In terms of logistics, we will mail out a recording of the webinar in the next few days. Typically, it's 2 to 3 business days. And if you need a copy of the slides, please do drop me a note, and we will be happy to share that with you. With that, let's get started. So first, let's recap what does HIPAA Omnibus imply and mean for covered entities, business associates, and vendors. And HIPAA Omnibus, which was enacted in September 2013, is really a culmination of HIPAA and high-tech related regulations that have been around since 1996. So HIPAA was enacted in 1996, high-tech came about in 2009, and HIPAA Omnibus is really a roll-up and a culmination of all the activities and feedback that the government received. So some key changes have happened as a result of HIPAA Omnibus. Let's talk about those. So one of the biggest changes that high-tech and now HIPAA Omnibus has brought about is that the business associates are now in the scope of the law. So along with covered entities, all business associates need to be compliant with HIPAA. And not only that, there is a shared responsibility and liability that covered entities and business associates have to ensure that they are HIPAA compliant, that they are taking steps to proactively manage their downstream business associates and vendors. The enforcements of HIPAA compliance and audits are certainly increasing. They're going up rapidly, and not only the federal agencies, but state auditor generals are in the purview, are in the scope to be able to audit any medical entity. So the scope has gone up. The fines have gone up. Now the highest fine level is $1.5 million per incident. It used to be $50,000 maximum per year. This was as part of HIPAA. High-tech had changed it, and that's been strengthened and finalized by HIPAA Omnibus. And there is also a potential for criminal prosecution. So if it has been found that you have willfully neglected not to be compliant with HIPAA, and there's some misrepresentation, not only you get fined for $1.5 million per incident, but you can be potentially criminally prosecuted as well. So it's a big risk that you run into if you're not careful. And these fines are kept by HHS, the Health and Human Services, and Office of Civil Rights, which is the enforcement agency that the government has. And not only that, there's some provisions for whistleblowers to get a part of the proceeds. So there is an incentive built into the system to, to increase enforcement, to increase adoption of HIPAA through a carrot and stick principle. There are some other changes for data breach notification. Now there's a window of 60 days that needs to be enforced, where if you're a covered entity or a business associate and you get breached involving more than 500 records, then you have 60 days to report it to HHS. And there should be an agreement between the covered entities and the business associates to decide on who does what, but ultimately the responsibility and liability rests with the covered entity to make sure that the reporting happens. So there are lots of new changes, minor changes, but very important changes that have happened as a result of the HIPAA Omnibus law. And then, of course, the need to do risk analysis is something that's part of HIPAA Omnibus. It was there earlier, but now the government is very strict about ensuring that everybody does it on a regular basis. So before we jump into the details, let me spend a few minutes on the background. And this might be something that you folks are already familiar with, but let me repeat it. So the definition of a business associate, which is now in the purview of the HIPAA Omnibus law, is any entity or every entity that handles PHI information. PHI means patient health information, or private or personal health information. So if you're interacting with a lawyer, a garbage disposal agency, electronic medical record provider, accountant, anybody who has access to PHI is considered to be a BA. And there are about 1.2 million businesses in the US, while there are about 700,000 covered entities. There are about 1.2 million businesses in the US that need to be compliant with HIPAA, and that's the law. So why should you bother? This is not a trivial matter. In fact, healthcare businesses have been the target of breaches. Or in 2014, about 40% of all breaches happened to affect healthcare businesses. So it's a big problem, and this is growing year over year. And the reason is simple. The healthcare information, the PHI information, is very valuable in the underground market. And believe it or not, there's an Amazon marketplace like trading area where you can buy and sell personal health information. So this is healthcare information is very valuable, and healthcare businesses of all size are under attack. And that's the critical takeaway that you should have from this session today. So besides the fear of getting hacked, it's also the law, and you need to do risk analysis to get the meaningful use attestation dollars from the federal government. And as you know, the government has put aside $28 billion to deal with to provide payments as for implementing electronic medical records. So the government has put together a carrot and stick approach to ensuring that every business gets to be HIPAA compliant. And starting in 2016, instead of getting paid, businesses will have a disincentive or a penalty in terms of reimbursement, that they will get percentages chopped off the reimbursement that they get from Medicare and Medicaid in case they're not HIPAA compliant or if they don't do security risk analysis. Besides, the government is also following a policy similar to what IRS does, where they would randomly audit about 5% of the medical organizations. And this includes, by the way, both covered entities and business associates. So they would do a random audit to ensure that you are HIPAA compliant and that you're taking steps to protect and secure PHI information. So there is a huge market set of market drivers driving the need to become HIPAA compliant. So let's jump right into it. Given the background, given the reasons for doing security risk analysis to do HIPAA compliance, let's talk about what does it entail to do security risk analysis. So this is the legalese coming from HIPAA, where it states that there's a need to conduct an accurate and thorough assessment of the potential risk and vulnerabilities to the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of protected health information. And so you hear some keywords here, which are risks, vulnerability, critical assets, which are PHI information, and we'll expand on that as we go along. So another perspective to think about is, security risk analysis is very important. If you're an organization, whether you're a healthcare organization or any other organization, there is a need to identify what are the weak links in the organization. And the weak links here means from a security perspective. That could be compromised by internal attackers, or it could be an external malicious user who's trying to break in. So as an organization, risk analysis will tell you what are those weak links. And really what it is doing is it's providing a map, a compass for the organization where you're able to look at what security gaps exist, what are the threats that can compromise and exploit these gaps by leveraging the vulnerabilities that exist in the system. System could be IT related, it could be process related, it could be people related, excuse me. And then the likelihood and impact of such a compromise from happening is really pointing to the organizational risk exposure. And the cost of doing risk analysis might seem onerous, but if you don't do it, the average cost of a breach reparation or repair dealing with a breach and coming out of it is about $5.5 million. Not to mention the brand damage and the other negative press that you might get along with lawsuits. So the cost of not of getting breached is huge, and risk analysis can go a long way in mitigating the risk exposure that you would have. And this is also required by multiple compliance regulations like HIPAA, PCI, FISMA. No matter which vertical you are on or what your needs are, this would be a bottom line requirement. So what does risk management entail? Let's keep diving into it a bit more in detail. So there are multiple factors that go into risk assessment, and we'll keep peeling the onion to get you more detail. But at a high level, you can think of risk management as looking at all the critical assets in the organization that you're trying to protect, and you're doing an assessment of all the threats and vulnerabilities that could affect these critical assets. And remember, I said critical asset could be people related, it could be process related, it could be IT asset related. So all of those are potential points of attack or weak links that can potentially be compromised. So once you know the critical assets, you do a risk assessment to understand the exposure or the gaps that you have, and then you do risk mitigation to plug the gaps that are identified by this process. And there's a need to repeat this in an ongoing fashion so that you are staying on top of any changes that happen. So this is really the building block of any risk management model that that anybody out there would would follow. And this shows that when you're doing a risk management or risk assessment, and management will be fixing all the open issues that are found. So when you're doing a risk assessment, you're trying to understand, you're trying to understand all the threats sources that could affect your business. And threat source could be whether if you're prone to an earthquake, or if you have a server sitting on the internet that could be broken in. So there are multiple kinds of threats that could affect your organization. And these threat sources use a set of actions or events to exploit weaknesses in the system and thereby cause adverse damage by compromising your critical assets. The chances of that happening and the impact thereby is really captured in the impact and likelihood variables here. So by looking at threat sources, threat events that are exploiting vulnerabilities, and the impact it causes with the likelihood of that happening, if you evaluate all of the threat sources, all the threat events, and all the vulnerabilities, and assign a weightage to that, you are essentially coming up with a risk score or risk exposure for the organization. Now, so this is the things that can cause, these are the activities that can cause bad things. What is really protecting your organization are the security controls. So while you're looking at all the threats and vulnerabilities, the security controls are really your defense mechanism for detecting and protecting and repelling some of these attacks. So the risk exposure or the risk management model looks into what are the current security controls that are in place, and what is the net risk exposure when you look at the organization as a whole. So a risk management model is evaluating holistically the organization's ability to understand the different factors, different threats that can compromise the critical assets. It's also trying to understand what controls are in place to detect or prevent such attacks from compromising these critical assets, and the net result is the risk exposure that you have. So if you look at HIPAA, what does that mean? So from a HIPAA Omnibus certification requirement, there is a need to do all of this. There is a need to do a HIPAA assessment, which provides a list of administrative, physical, and technical safeguards that HIPAA prescribes that an organization should implement. There is a need to do security scanning of all the PHI assets. The PHI assets could be IT assets that handle PHI information, desktops, servers, workstations, firewalls. All of those are PHI assets that need to be security scanned so that all the weak links, the vulnerabilities can be detected and remediated to solve the problem or to ensure that they cannot be hacked in. Then there is a need to do proactive BA and vendor management. If you're a covered entity or a business associate, there's a need to ensure that any downstream entities that you're sharing the PHI information with is taking steps to ensure protection and security of the PHI information. It's no longer good enough to have a business associate agreement and forget about the liability. The covered entities and BAs are directly responsible. They need to be proactive in managing their downstream entities. And that's the requirement now. And then finally, security risk analysis puts a little prioritization or a risk exposure score for the entire organization that needs to be managed. So all of these are required as part of HIPAA certification requirements for both covered entities and business associates. And this is also required for meaningful use attestation, as I mentioned earlier. I talked about this, that critical assets can be anything that can affect the organization. It could be related to people, processes, data. Data could be intellectual property, PHI information. If you're a healthcare entity, most of your critical assets might be in PHI. But if you have some processes that are unique to you, or anything that can be construed as a critical asset, that needs to be protected as well. So anything that you think is critical, it needs to be protected, and that's where the risk analysis will tell you what the risk exposure is. And then the associated question is, what is the value of the critical asset and what impact it will have in case this critical asset is compromised? So let's say if you have a company website which is used for e-commerce, and that company website goes down. So that's a problem. That's part of the operational continuity that you need to have. It's a critical asset and hence needs to be protected. So security risk analysis is telling you and pointing out and allows you to think holistically about what are the critical assets in the company that you really care about that would make or break the company in terms of accessibility, in terms of resources that are required to be made available externally. So let's dive right into it a bit more. I talked about security risk analysis. I talked about the requirement from HIPAA with respect to what needs to be done for risk analysis. And so now we kind of going one layer below to understand what does HIPAA risk analysis, security risk analysis entail. So the first step is to gather all the critical assets. In this case, any assets that touch PHI information. Touch meaning it could be used for viewing PHI information, it could be used for storing, transmitting, or accessing PHI information. The next thing is to identify all threats and vulnerabilities that could be affected, that could be affecting these critical assets. And you see these these particular section citation IDs. These are coming from HIPAA. That allows you to thread it as you go through the HIPAA questionnaire. You'll be able to, essentially you are providing this information as part of these citation IDs. And then the next step is to assess what is the current security controls that are in place. So you're looking at the defense mechanisms and enumerating them as well so that you can figure out the efficacy of these security controls that are in place, that are protecting as your shield to protect or to prevent such compromises from happening. Then the next step is to understand what's the likelihood of these threats and the potential impact if these threats are carried through and are not prevented by these security controls. And so you're looking at all possible threats, all possible vulnerabilities that might be affecting all the critical assets in your organization, looking at the likelihood impact and the efficacy of the security controls that can protect or prevent these different attacks from happening. And the net result is an estimate of the risk score or the risk exposure for the organization. So this means that if you're in a high risk zone, that means most of the threats that could affect you as an organization will be able to exploit the vulnerabilities, and the current security controls that are in place are not really going to help and protect you. So you need to beef that up. You need to enhance those security controls. And so that's the next step, which is to, once you know the risk exposure, you need to understand which security controls need to be enhanced, need to be put in place perhaps to protect and prevent these secure threats from affecting you and thereby bring down your risk exposure. So that's really the process of risk analysis. You are continuously evaluating your organization's readiness to deal with internal or external threats and which are exploiting weaknesses, and the security controls that are required to prevent and detect and avoid such PHI critical assets from being compromised. Now, this is a detailed chart, which I won't go through it, but this is really enumerating what I mentioned in the previous charts, which is around the 9 steps required to do a risk analysis and repeat the step to do a continuous monitoring. And you're essentially looking at identifying the critical assets, the threats, the vulnerabilities, the controls that you have in place, the likelihood impact of such threat from carrying through, and that gives you the risk score, and then finally recommendations that that you need to put in place. So why do we care about security risk analysis? I mentioned a number of reasons earlier, but one of the key reasons is also that Office of Civil Rights, or the OCR, is very keen on ensuring that security risk analysis is done and performed by every medical organization, every covered entity and BA. When they ran the pilot in 2013, they found most, if not all, of the organizations didn't do a good job or did not do a security risk analysis at all. So this is a bottom line requirement. Not to mention that if you are seeking meaningful use attestation dollars, this was a precondition to getting the grant. And so if you've gotten the grant and if you haven't done security risk analysis, you are in violation and could be charged for misrepresentation of facts. So the need for doing continuous monitoring is really because things change, and things change because of internal organizational issues. It could change also because of any external threat factors or vulnerabilities being discovered. And literally, there's a new set of vulnerabilities that are discovered every week. So it's important that we do a continuous monitoring, not just of risk analysis, but for the overall compliance posture to make sure that as an organization you're protected, that you are able to detect and prevent breaches from happening altogether. So now let's talk. So we talked about the need for HIPAA security risk analysis. What does it mean to achieve and accomplish HIPAA security risk analysis? And I know what you guys are thinking, that this is very complicated, and doing this as a manual process is very challenging. So now what we're going to talk about is Agify, which is an automated tool for not only achieving HIPAA certification, but it also helps you automate the HIPAA security risk analysis process by really minimizing, if not eliminating, any manual work. There might still be some manual work needed to deal with some questions and answers that you need to answer, but it automates the process of the entire 9-step process that I talked about. So what is Agify? Agify, as I mentioned earlier, is a comprehensive solution for security risk and compliance management. So while HIPAA is one of the key regulations supported, really the solution is vertical agnostic. Excuse me. And it has built-in solutions for assessment, scanning, remediation, monitoring in an ongoing fashion, so that once you do it, you can repeat the process, automate the entire process. And it's got a built-in compliance assessment tool. It's got a security assessment tool. There's a security scanning solution built in. There's a complete risk management framework that's available, and it comes pre-packaged with a knowledge base with standards, policies, and templates. So it's a very unique solution in the market that looks at security holistically by combining all these different elements that are needed to make sure that you're secure and compliant and are able to stay on top of any risk exposure. The solution has won multiple awards. We've gotten the highest rating from SC Magazine of 5 out of 5 stars. And think of this as a single solution that provides complete automation for all of your security risk and compliance needs with a single dashboard view of all that is happening inside the organization. And I'll give you a glimpse of what does that mean. I won't go through this, but this is showing you the automation framework that's built into the tool. And the framework is really going through 3 steps primarily. First step is to understand where do you stand as an organization from a security risk and compliance perspective. And we call that the baseline assessment stage. Once you do the baseline assessment, you know what the gaps are, what's your risk exposure, and what's missing from a security risk perspective. So the next step is to remediate or to fix the open issues that are found, the gaps that are found, and therein the tool will guide you through an expert system-based approach to tell you all the policies and contracts that you need, all the training that you need, and give you complete guidance to fix the open issues that are found. And then once you fix the open issues, you then need to continuously monitor to ensure that if things are changing, that you are notified and alerted for any changes that happen so that you can address it in real time. So it's a continuous monitoring solution that allows you to do assessments, to fix the problems, and then to continuously monitor. And you have access to a real-time dashboard with reports that you can generate from the system with the click of a button that allows you to completely understand and provide an audit trail for any external or internal auditors that might come knocking. So for example, if you get audited by OCR, you can generate reports that show exactly what you've done so far and the audit trail behind it. There's complete automation for risk management. And remember, I said that really risk management is dealing with these 6 variables, all critical assets, threats, vulnerabilities, and the impact, likelihood impact of these threats from going through. The controls are really your security defense mechanism. So you're trying to assess the efficacy of the entire framework to understand where do you stand from an organizational point of view. And I won't go through the details, but suffice it to say that we have automated the process as much as you can, which is a big leap from the manual state of affairs that's out there in the industry. And the purpose here is to be able to come up with a risk score, risk exposure that's a true reflection of the actual risk that the organization has. And then you can automate the process by repeating it frequently as often as you want. I want to give you a quick flavor of the tool before we close in the next couple of minutes. One is that there is a real-time dashboard that's available to you. And this dashboard will show you your overall risk posture, your security risk posture, your compliance posture, if you're, in this case, a HIPAA posture. You know how many assets are in critical state that have vulnerabilities that can be exploited, and your overall risk exposure, high, medium, low, so that you can address them as soon as possible. And if you have multiple locations, you will get a multi-location view with a location-specific risk exposure level, and then overall organization level risk exposure level. So you can use the tool for small businesses to large enterprises which might have multiple locations or multiple views. There's a risk dashboard view as well, where you can look at risk exposure from multiple perspectives. You can look at which assets contribute to the severity level, what kind of threats are causing the most of the threats. We can look at heat maps to see which assets and you can look at which assets contribute the most. So you'll get a what if analysis dashboard that allows you to play around and see which assets and which controls need to be put in place to detect and prevent such attacks from happening. There's also a built-in knowledge base, as I mentioned earlier, that has complete policy templates, procedure templates that you can leverage. So the BA agreement, for example, there's a template there that you can use. There's a built-in knowledge base that has industry best practices. It's got risk parameters. It's got citation guidance, so that if you're not familiar with HIPAA, the system will guide you and explain to you what needs to be done and how it will be done. And it also talks about best practices that are leveraged from the industry, so that you know what you're doing is ratified and is followed by the leading industry players as well. You can also get to see the top vulnerabilities that exist in your system, and you can take action by fixing and downloading patches or fixing configuration issues that might happen, that might be causing those vulnerabilities. So all of the information that you need to find the vulnerabilities, the weak links, and to fix them are included right in the tool. And then you can generate remediation guidance and generate multiple reports which tell you what things are missing, which controls are non-compliant, and for the non-compliant controls, it will tell you how to fix the open issues that are found. So it's a complete soup to nuts solution to deal with all of your HIPAA or any other vertical requirements-based security, risk, and compliance needs. And from a HIPAA perspective, it's pretty much the leading tool out there from a healthcare HIPAA certification and risk analysis requirements-wise. So given the background of the tool, my closing remarks are that HIPAA is enforcements are ramping up. As I said, 5% of organizations will be randomly selected by HHS and OCR to be audited. This is also required for meaningful use attestation, and risk analysis is an integral part of doing MU attestation. And you can use an automation tool like Agify to take care of all of your HIPAA high-tech needs, including security risk analysis. We can generate meaningful use attestation reports. So we can automate and help you automate and take care of all of your security risk and compliance assurance needs. With that, let me pause here and see whether you have any questions. Please type in your questions in the Q&A section of GoToWebinar, and I will pick it up as and when you type it. You have 2 minutes to type in your questions. So the first question is, excuse me, how is this different from some of the other tools out there? This is a unique tool in the industry in terms of its automation capabilities, in terms of integration of different elements that comprise HIPAA certification. So as I mentioned earlier, for HIPAA certification to happen, you need to do HIPAA assessment, you need to do security scan, you need to do BA vendor management, and then you need to do risk analysis. Traditionally, there are 4 different tools that you will find in the marketplace that does bits and pieces of this. What Agify has done is, because of the problems that were reported by our customers, we have one integrated solution that does it all, that takes care of all of your security risk and compliance needs. And so you can deploy this one single solution and use it for assessment, for monitoring, for remediation, and it's got a complete knowledge base. So it's a very unique offering, and it's very cost effective. So compared to anything that's out there, we are at least 5 to 10x cheaper than anything that's out there, primarily because we are a cloud-based subscription offering. We don't need any specialized hardware, and it's all done through software. So it's a very innovative and disruptive solution compared to anything that's out there. So let's look at the other question. I see some questions here. Information on partnering. Yes. So what I would suggest is, if you can drop me an email at this address, we can send you detailed information about partnering. And we do have a partner or a reseller program that's very well developed, and we can talk about that in detail. Okay. There's another question. I have a new client that rents office space to individual holistic providers, message therapy, acupuncture. They have told me that they have no PHI. How do I convince? I've not been able to convince them that they need to do a risk analysis. Does HIPAA Omnibus apply to them? Yes. So if they handle PHI information, patient health information or personal health information, and if they are getting the customer information from a covered entity upstream, they are required by law to do a security risk analysis. So again, if you can drop me a note at anupam.sahai@ag5.com or info@ag5.com, we can help you make the argument and make the case for it. But from what I see, it looks like they need to be HIPAA compliant for sure. Any other questions? Please type it into the Q&A section, and we'll give you another minute or so before we close if there are no other questions. And again, feel free to drop a note to me in case you think of any other questions after the session. If you need a copy of the slides, please, you can again drop me a note. Yes, and there's a question about, yes, you can access the slides. You can drop me a note if you need a copy of the slides. I'm happy to send it to you. If you want to play around with the free edition of the software, you can download it from ag5.com/community, or we are happy to set up a demo session with you to give you a complete demo of the AG5 platform. So looks like there are no other questions. So let me thank you, all of you, for coming. We appreciate your time, and I know your time is very valuable. We would love to hear your feedback on this session or any other topics that you would like us to cover. We would be happy to pick up those topics as we go forward. So thank you again, and have a great day. Bye for now.